One. Uh, Hello, everybody, and welcome to the STC Fall webinar. Today, we're going to have Marilyn Woelk speak with us. She is going to be speaking about managing the MarComm TechComm Showdown. If you don't know Marilyn, she is the owner and president of Wingz Creative and Technical Group in the Rochester area. She has a lot of experience in business and communications consulting, process improvement, and project management for marketing, communications, training, and documentation projects. And some of her clients have included Xerox, Johnson & Johnson, EDS, Fujifilm, just to name a few. And she's a very active member of the STC. If you kind of know, if you're very active in STC, you've probably met Marilyn at some point. So we're very excited to have her, as you may have heard before we started the recording. She was originally going to be giving this presentation at Conduit 2017, and unfortunately a family event had prevented her from coming to give the presentation. So we're very excited to have her present today. And just a little bit of business beforehand. Since this is a lunch and learn webinar, I've put everybody on mute for the moment, just so that way we don't have any background noise and we can hear everything clearly. And we will have an opportunity to have questions, and when that moment comes up, I will open up the mics again so you can ask questions. And in the meantime, there also is the chat that's below your interface. So if you do have any questions, or if there's any technical difficulties or anything like that, just put a message in there and I'll try to respond while Marilyn's speaking. And on that, I guess I'll turn it over to you, Marilyn. So welcome and thanks again. So take it away.
Thanks. Thanks for your patience and, waiting for this webinar. One of the traditional, I would say, conflicts in, getting information out to customers, whether they're end users or the people who, you first are approaching to buy the product, is this tension between MarComm and TechComm. And so I've always kind of viewed it like the musical Oklahoma, where it says the farmer and the cowman can be friends. Well, the TechComm and the MarComm can be friends too. So I just want to kind of use that scenario and talk about this conflict. Obviously, conflict happens. So in this case scenario, we're going to let the farmer be played by MarComm, and the cowman is going to be played by TechComm, and you will understand why momentarily. So, why aren't these guys getting along? Why aren't the farmer and the cowman friends? Well, I think this line from Oklahoma kind of sums it up. One likes to push a plow, the other likes to chase a cow. They have different views, and sometimes that's a means of separation. So here's how I'm looking at MarComm. MarComm, it likes to fancy things up. It likes to make the land look better. It's colorful, like fruits and veggies. It's about increase. It's getting, it's measurable. They want a certain number of sales, or they want a crop yield, and it's important to plant their messages at the right time in the right place, to get that to happen. And they're frequently scrambling if, one type of marketing doesn't work, then they're, changing it all up and doing it differently. So, they're all about crop rotation and, is it yielding fruit? So the TechComm cowman, he's functional. He just says, we have some things to do. We have to get cows to the pen. They have to get to the watering trough. They might get trampled a bit in the process, but that's all right because we're not about pretty. We're about functional. And basically, if the cats don't go to the bin, then we've got to teach them, by a different method. We have to do some remediation. And so they're trying to basically, rope in people to behave in a certain manner and arrive at a certain defined endpoint. So the farmer and the cowman, once again from Oklahoma, it says he comes out west and builds a lot of fences and builds them right across our cattle ranges. So there's an issue with territory. And basically, they have different purposes for the land. They step on each other in the process. They don't communicate, and they might even withhold information from one another. So the second part of this says, the farmer should be sociable with a cowboy if he rides by and asks for food and water. Well, the TechComm and the MarComm, basically, TechComm comes by and asks MarComm for information about what they're doing. And they're like, don't worry about it. We're just doing our own thing. They won't sometimes hand over or talk about their approach. So they're two different breeds. So I'm going to give you a couple of examples of that, but I want to open up just briefly, and I want to hear from you some of the different kinds of places where you might have seen this happen. So, do you have access to MarComm? Do you see conflicts occurring? I'm going to let Danielle open it up for a few minutes, and we're going to just chat about that.
No, anyone have any? I've unmuted the phone, so if you would like to contribute, feel free to comment.
So my question is, do any of you have, access to MarComm, to what they're developing for your product, or that kind of thing simultaneously? And if so, do you see any potential conflicts, or have you experienced any?
Well, Marilyn, I know that I haven't experienced this myself, but I have heard stories about, especially in relation to social media, for example, where the marketing tries to promise one thing, and then TechComm will say, "No, the product doesn't do that. Why are you promising something that it doesn't do?"
So that's interesting, because implied promises that are not functionally accurate was not one of the things on my list, but I've seen it happen. So, anybody else have any particular examples?
Let me see. I think I just saw something in. David Calloway just had said that the input was ignored, but was ignored and interaction was not welcome. But for him, it was a couple years ago that had happened. That I guess they kind of wanted to, as you said, keep their territory. It sounded like.
Yep. So let's talk about their perspectives. So MarComm sees TechComm as boring and not customer friendly, and again, they try to shove them out of their territory. TechComm sees MarComm as glitzy and not functional, impractical, not connected to the actual uses of the product. So they often define marketing differently. So in MarComm, they see more categories, and I'm going to talk about those in just a minute. But what I see with like TechComm is they just say everything that has any kind of a marketing bent, they just call it advertising. Oh, it's glitzy. I don't want advertising. So here's a couple of ways that kind of goes. There's all different categories, and these for the things that that I see most readily is there's a difference between persuasion and education. There's a difference between sales and adoption. There's a big difference between the corporate office and the field. And there's a difference between customer focus and user focus. TechComm versus the sales force. So I'm going to give you a couple different examples. I used to create sell sheets for the corporate internal sales force. So I was sort of the, I guess I would say the hybrid technical MarComm. But what I found out was that the sales force was making their own communications. And they were making them very specific to the customer, but the graphics were terrible, the fonts were terrible, the grammar, punctuation, terrible, spelling, terrible. So, you know, we had this standard problem that they were not letting us, they weren't using what we provided them. So I was just having a conversation yesterday about this with Stephanie. She's our Rochester program manager. And I said, you know, did you ever see that? And she said, it's funny that you mention it because I supervised or managed 30 sales reps. And that happened all the time. They created their own technical MarComm and ignored marketing. And they, it was a mess, and they were going rogue and doing this all the time. So I caught them at it, and I made them show me what they had and said, if you insist on using this, then we need to, you know, get better graphics and get it edited and get it basically wordsmithed, you know. So why not make those connections in the first place? So you got to deal with some attitudes along the way. So we'll talk a bit about those too. So farmer and cowman, like I said, different purposes for land. And in this case, land means words. You know, they use the words differently than we do. They all are producing, you know, language and information and technical specs and those kinds of things. It's all food, but it's like having a vegetarian and a meat lover in the same room. They don't, you know, they don't have the same taste. They're often using different tools to create things, different terminology, and different measurements of success. They sometimes will use the same resource like a cow, but one wants the meat, one wants the butter. So, for example, I had a client say to me, oh, I need you to do an informational piece. So I came in to do an informational piece, and when I looked at it, I said, oh, you kind of want a marketing piece. He said, oh, no, marketing's glitzy and all that. We don't want anything like that. We just want an informational piece. So we wrote this beautiful informational piece, and we turned it in. And they said, no, this isn't one we want at all. And I said, well, what do you mean? And they said, well, it just lacks something. And I said, well, is the information incorrect? He said, no. And I said, is it incomplete? And he said, no. And I said, well, then what is it? And he said, it just needs a little oomph. And I said, what does oomph mean? And he said, well, you know, we need people's buy-in. And I said, buy-in. Okay, define buy-in. And he said, well, you know, they're going to either commit resources like people or resources like seat charges, excuse me, or resources like money. And I said, now we're getting somewhere. And I said, any time money is changing hands, it's a marketing piece. I said, what you're reacting to is that you think I'm going to create an advertising piece. That's a different thing. So what's the difference? The difference, and this is just my own definition, but I found it to be pretty true, is that an advertising piece. It was designed to create desire for a product or a service. It looks for customers and it sells new technologies. In other words, it's creating a need. Now, marketing, from my perspective, is a little bit different. Marketing says that basically, you know that you have a product that is in demand. The need is already out there. So now you need to persuade somebody to adopt it. And so you basically find the interested market and you persuade them to purchase it. It's a much softer sell. So what I told the gentleman with the informational document is, let me just put a light marketing spin on this. Let me dust it, so to speak, with a little bit of persuasion and bring it back. And so I brought it back and he said, this is exactly what we want. So, if the definitions are different, then, sometimes they're not even asking for what it is they actually need. So that becomes a factor in communication. So what are the commonalities or the mutual interests of both parties? Well, basically, this song from Oklahoma says, basically, once something is forced, like having to join the union, then the farmer, the cowman, and the merchant, have to cooperate. So in TechComm, MarComm, once you have a product that needs to be delivered and you have documents that need to be produced because you need to sell them, there are mutual interests you can build upon to say, if we're going to make more money, we're going to get a better profit, we're going to sell more product, then we need to cooperate. So, they can share research, about the product, about the technical specs, about the customer's desires, so that this becomes highly customizable. And you might end up with one basic marketing piece and then several variations to do with, customization for those customers based on region or type of product or, whatever you're producing. So learn the travel path of the cows and the behaviors they exhibit. So in other words, don't wait until the guy has to say, I need an informational piece. But actually, if you really look at the path of the cows, we're really talking about, needing to actually get this to be a persuasive piece. All that should be mapped ahead of time in terms of design. So even when a customer says, I need an informational piece, or maybe they say, I need a marketing piece, and it's really informational, you have to kind of test the assumptions that the customer has or that the manager has to make sure that the type of communication that you're delivering is the correct type. So, you can also do some things to build efficiency, like, cows eat corn, so plant the corn closer to the cows. That's mutually beneficial. So in the case of MarComm and TechComm, if you can create something that will allow you, maybe it's a document and you use this document to give marketing communications people the latest technical changes because they've got to be able to update MarComm as well as TechComm, that might be helpful. Connect your purposes. Basically you're in it together, and you both have things to bring to the party. Some of you bring meat, some of you bring milk and butter, whatever that may be. Basically, you'll get a better product if you can cooperate. So definitions, create in your organization definitions for advertising versus marketing, awareness comms versus instructional comms, those kinds of things. And generally speaking, when it comes to awareness, a lot of times that will fall under marketing, but it's designed to notify people of changes and new offerings or training and to get them to adopt that. So it can be kind of a change management piece. And then instructional comms are generally, they bought it, they've got to know the steps to accomplish it, which is sort of the last half of adoption. If they don't know how to do it, then, or to use it, then you're not going to sell many more products. So those things are tied together. So identify common knowledge, almost like content management. What does MarComm need that TechComm also needs? And, I would say it's extremely key. And this has happened a lot because I do technical MarComm currently. There are many times that somebody comes along and says, oh no, that thing that you just put the specs out for and advertised and sent out to people, well, no, that product portion, that technical spec changed, 3 days ago. Well, you've got the built-in, communication systems that say who needs to know this when this changes, and MarComm is definitely in that loop of people that need to know. So you can also create a review board or a discussion board, that talks about these MarComm and TechComm issues, and you can have that, review sample documents. I wouldn't make them the bottleneck to review everything, but especially if you have a new product that's going to launch, then you could, set up a committee to say, okay, these are the kinds of information that both groups are going to need. These are the kinds of documents they're creating. Here's where the overlap occurs, and then build some standards between the two groups. And what I hear often is just that, the corporate office is out of touch with the field. They're creating things that aren't relevant. Well, they're not as in touch with the customers, but in order to create the MarComm, they really need to know what the customers want. So it's really important to keep that communication open between corporate and the field. And, like I said, make sure everybody's updated on the technical things. And then, you can create this liaison. If you don't have time to do a board, create a board and review things, and you can just, pick a person who is a designated liaison and make sure that both parties have all the same information and that they're getting along and sharing information and not, being in conflict about anything. And if you have a person who has aptitude, you can cross-train that person. We had a group that I went into that was just a total mess, and everybody was doing their own thing, different softwares, different fonts, different layout. I mean, it was a mess. And they were trying to sort of do both TechComm and MarComm out of the same organization. So the first thing I did was go in and assess who had the skills to do both. And then we picked a point person and got him training and got, all the resource books. And, he was more kind of on the, he was not good at grammar and punctuation, let's just put it that way. So we got him all the, Chicago Manual of Style and all these different resources and put him through additional training so that he could become that liaison. So basically, the farmer and the accountant get along, then the customer gets a more efficiently produced product more accurate product and doesn't get two different stories or two different sets of facts that could be confusing. So ultimately, that can create lower cost, a higher quality product, and basically build the brand, of what you're trying to launch. So I guess I would like to just field a few questions. Anything that you want to know about what I've been saying, and then I'm going to give you a little bit of time to kind of give me your case scenarios if you have them, or we can talk about how to deal with specific issues. So I'll let Danielle open it up, and we can have some conversation. Danielle.
I was muted. I gave you a whole question and you didn't hear it. I muted everybody but me.
Okay, I was like, I hope that this didn't cut off in the middle of the webinar.
I was waiting. Sorry about that, everybody. I have muted everyone but me. David had sent me a question to ask, which was bringing corn and cow together is empowered by a strong content strategy, which is usually enabled through a dynamic CMS. Do you have any comments, in that respect about, content strategy involved in keeping these two groups cooperating with each other?
Well, obviously that, when you're doing that commonality mapping, if you have a good content strategy system, if you have a good content management system, you're going to find the common phrases and the common, information that both parties would share. For some companies, they don't have a real content management system, but they can build sort of a functional communications process that is a good substitute for a content management system. And I think that's really important, that the process is defined for how does information flow, and who defines what content is going into something. But what I did with mine was, because we did not have a content management system for the specific product or the specific types of things I was doing, I would just grab and catalog common pieces of information, by subject. And so I sort of created my own snippets file, if you will, just so that when somebody said to me, we're creating this other mail note and we need to know about this, and we need to have a meeting or whatever, I would say, well, let me send you some of the catchphrases, before the meeting, so you have a chance to look at them, and then we can talk about it. But yes, absolutely, if you're in a place that has a good content strategy and content management systems, then obviously it's a lot better. You still are going to have the problem of, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make them drink. Well, just because it's in the system doesn't mean that people will always avail themselves of it. And sometimes there are people who are, especially Salesforce for some reason, they have their own little rogue set of memos and things. So I think, there has to be some investigation by the manager to just say, what are you using with the customer? And I know that you have some of your own stuff you're creating. So share it with the class, what are you using? Why are you using it? How does it help your specific customer, better than maybe what you're taking out of the system that's generic? And do we need to create, by area, like a localized version of this, because the current job that I'm doing, we had not just nationalities. I mean, things had to be localized for, all different countries and different languages, but also now there's an additional complication because there's been 2 different business units, completely different personalities now. So we now have to customize by business unit. And in some cases, here's a good example of this. I created a document for thyroid assays to be sold. And what I found out was that in the U.S. market, the person that the sales reps were selling to was the hospital administrator who was concerned with throughput and, speed and accuracy of the tests. But in Europe, the same product was sold and it went directly to the doctors. And so the doctor wants to know, accuracy of diagnosis, he wants to know more about how the actual test is conducted from a clinical chemistry point of view. Same product. We're selling the same product. You can't possibly use the same marketing sell sheet for US and for Europe because they have 2 completely different needs and they're 2 completely different audiences that are buying it. So hopefully that answers some of your question. If it doesn't, David, hit me back. Tell me what the next one is.
Yeah. Okay. Does anyone else have any questions or comments that they'd like to add? The floor is yours. All lines are open. Marilyn, one of the things that I was noticing when we were talking about the idea of content strategy, and you're talking about, the idea that, these groups have to marry up, and, if you have a good CMS, that theoretically you should be able to share that information. Why do you think, other than being territorial, it seems like in content strategy circles, that's always the big push, is the idea of single sourcing, and, they're always pushing
Right.
data as the method to do that. But why do you think there's like a psychological barrier as well, just to, like, if it's there and you've got a CMS, and why things aren't shared as much? Why do you think that would be?
Well, it's funny because, the sales force is always kind of, this is gonna sound a little bad, but sometimes they sort of, they're rapidly changing scenarios. They sort of like to do things off the cuff, so they're less likely to go sit down and methodically look through, a content management system for the content that they need. The MarComm people in general, once again, I think the emphasis is more on the selling of the product, right? So they're just less content focused in general. They're more, what's the catchphrase that we're going to get that's going to make people want to buy this product? And there are times that I have developed a sell sheet that has had, what I thought were the things that a customer would want, like the specs for the product, the speed of the product, the adoption of the product, the service follow-up, service and delivery aspects of the product.
Mm-hmm.
And I had somebody come along and say, oh, we don't want any of that in here. We want it to be more like advertising. We want the one catchphrase. Feel the, what's the felt need? And so in one case, I remember there was a printer they were taking away, and people, they were replacing it with a faster, better printer. And So I thought, well, you want to tell them how much better the new printer is and how many colors it has and all that. No, they didn't want to do any of that. They wanted to put together just a phrase that said, there's a new dance, no more rumba, which was the name of the first device. And now we're going to become chameleons, which was the name of the second device. And, you know, see how the music has changed or something like that. It was very, they did not want to put those technical specs in, but then the customers come back wanting them. So even if your first piece is not technically specific, at some point the customer is going to come back and want, you know, that technical information. So then you have to really think about, you know, when you're putting together a customer campaign, you know, maybe the first thing that you're advertising isn't technically accurate. Like you said, it's not like you're promising the printer will do this, and maybe it doesn't do that at all. So, you know, I just think that even from the very beginning, those messages, you know, have to match what is actually the technical, functional abilities of the product. And it just seems like a lot of times marketing is more interested in the hook and the catchphrase to get someone's attention than they are you're saying something or promising something that might not be true. So more and more, and it's different in small companies than it is in big corporations, but I'm working for a big corporation, and we don't even have a content management system for what we're doing. We have a place to park it all when we're done, but we don't have, you know, we have archives and things, libraries that people can look at, but they're not using any kind of common management system between MarComm and TechComm for this product.
Right. It sounds, you know, I took a digital marketing course a little while ago, and it sounds like what you're talking about, you know, overall is that it really has to be a balance of both, because one of the things that I remember learning in my class was that it used to be a funnel where you get them at the big catchphrase and then you would funnel down to like the adoption and actual sale. And with the digital age, it changed because now people can actually go online and look at the TechComm stuff, look at the manuals and say, oh, you know, or look at the FAQs. What are the kind of problems they're having? And sometimes marketing doesn't always seem to remember that, you know, things are kind of being flipped on their heads. So, you know, that's the sort of thing that's happening with that. So, you know, I don't know if that's accurate or not.
So, yeah, I think it just seems like you said, that basically the game has changed. People do, yes, go online and look at the technical specs, but I think also when the sales reps go to a location, they're not even flooding the customer with, you know, all the technical specs. They're saying, what's your problem specifically? And then can the system solve it? Not, here's all the things it can do, but it can fix this specific problem for you. So the way that they're coming about it is a different, you know, it's a different approach. And some things will be the same, but I have seen, like you said, time and time again, where the product doesn't do something and marketing advertises it as doing that, or the product name changes and marketing still has the old name, or the technical specs of the product change because it's in beta testing and they find things aren't working, so they change the machine. And then the next thing you know, the marketing has gone out. It's not accurate because now the machine has been re-engineered. So, you know, I look for places where, like, we had a manual one time that was talking about a fuse system in a printer, like a desktop printer. And when I went there, I saw that it took them 4 pages to explain how to put the printer oil into the printer. like the diffuser oil. And so I said, that's crazy. Why don't you just make it, a bidirectional or unidirectional bottle, or put a sticker on the front or something on the bottle when you manufacture it that says front, or towards control panel or something. And so they went, yep, that's what we're going to do. We're going to go and re-engineer that section of the equipment. Well, anything that went out before that told them, easily replaceable, consumables, for instance, wouldn't have been true unless they changed the machine.
Right.
And so a lot of times people will say something like, ease of use, blah, 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 inexpensive replaceables. And then you go, no, those consumables cost a lot of money. That's $100 in ink right there.
Sure.
So, you just got to make sure the messages match. And I'm sort of about information architecture. It's kind of an old word, but, it's kind of what content management, content strategy have become. But you really got to make sure that the customer gets the right information for their specific need, but also enough information that if their need changes, they have the technical specs, that they should have. So I just find that in a lot of companies, they don't give attention. And as a matter of fact, I asked in one company, can we see what marketing is doing? And I was told, no, we don't really have anything to do with that. Why would we care about that? And I said, well, do you get lists of products name changes or parts changes, or, do you know what's being advertised out of the marketing side about this product? And they said, you don't need to worry about that. That's just a separate entity. And I thought, I don't need to worry about it, but somebody needs to worry about it.
Right.
Because, the messages were not consistent.
Sure.
So
that's where we go. Okay. Well, we don't have much time left. Does anyone else have any other questions?
Hi, this is Dave Pierce, and I have something to add to your comments. I've observed that in certain situations, technical information provided through marketing channels, for instance, information going into a press kit, might not be dead on accurate at times. And the problem I've observed with that, and not just with products that I've worked on, but with products that I've queried about on the internet. So what will happen is some inaccurate information or some incomplete information gets into a press kit, and then someone who's using that information, a writer who's writing a column, reviewing the product or talking about the product, latches onto that information and then uses that in a negative way to present a negative description of the product, because their interpretation was that this product was lacking certain characteristics when indeed it wasn't. It was just inaccurately portrayed in the press kit. Have you ever encountered that sort of situation?
I have seen where, something wasn't fully described, and then someone has perpetuated that information. And a lot of times it can get perpetuated as a start through the internal company newsletter, and then somebody sees it, in the internal company newsletter, and then they perpetuate it outside of the company because they use that newsletter as a source for information and, refer to it saying, oh, well, the company newsletter says this, and then none of that information is really, especially when you're working on, I worked on copier units that we had 2 or 3 different models before the final. So what the first marketing was that went out, changed pretty dramatically by the time the system was a finished system. So, they would write the first advertising when it was in beta test to kind of get a jump on the market, right? And then the functionality of the system would change dramatically before they got the final version of the equipment. Right. And so, like I said, everything that went into the newsletter got copied and perpetuated. And then, yes, it does come across as kind of a black eye because, anytime a company claims that a product will do something or explains how it works and then it's not accurate, it just goes to the credibility of the company. It definitely can affect that.
Right. So in these instances, people in marketing might be wondering, or sales might be wondering, okay, why isn't this product selling? Why aren't we getting more interest in this product? And then they go out and they find that some writers have created some negative information based on inaccurate technical information that they got a hold of. Basically saying, oh, well, this product doesn't do this, or this product does this in a particular way, when it turns out that that's inaccurate and untrue. And it actually contains, the product contains the desirable features, but they are not being conveyed to the potential buyers. So I've seen that.
So I think that's a great business case for why, when your manager says, why do you need to know what marketing is doing or saying, or why do we need a liaison, or why do we need a joint review committee? Those kinds of scenarios are good ways to say, let me just tell you the kinds of things that have happened, And like I said, even with the stuff that was being presented to customers done by the sales reps were out there and their job was to sell the product, but they weren't in the lab doing the theory of operation on the thing like I was in the lab doing. And so as the system problems began being identified and they re-engineered those problems, the sales force just knows the basic specs initially. They weren't even connected to, this machine's going to be replaced and it's going to look like this and it's going to do something different. There was a lag between the change being known by the TechComm writers, the documentation people and the training people versus the sales force. So if that gap is closed, and the sales force knows when the changes come down, you're just going to make the process for sales more efficient. You're going to make, less problem with customer confusion or customers getting upset because they've been told one thing and something else is true. And you're going to reduce, a lot of the time and cost. The more information that gets shared, in my humble opinion, the less the actual process of documentation will cost, because you're getting the fastest, most reliable information and you're able to reuse it, so ultimately your cost will go down across all communications because you don't have I wrote it this way, it's wrong, I have to revise it. I'm waiting for 3 weeks on something, so I just wrote something and put it out in the stratosphere, and oops, now it's wrong. Now we have to do damage control. That's I would say, an iterative and ineffective process, and yet a lot of companies, haven't figured out how to pull, circle the wagons and get the TechComm and MarComm and Salesforce people all together. So thus, we have the farmer and the cowman.
Great. That was a great question, Dave. Are there any other comments or questions that we have, since we only have about 5 minutes or so left? Going once? Going twice? Okay, I guess that's it then. Well, what I'd like to do is just thank everybody again for coming. Marilyn, we appreciate your time, and I think we had a really good session here, and I think we learned a lot from, seeing what can be effective in trying to get MarComm and TechComm to work together, and hopefully we can have some nice steak with a nice butter sauce on top soon enough within the communications field. There you go. And for those of us, go ahead.
I was going to say, I hope you all go and listen to the song "The Farmer and the Cowman Can Be Friends" from Oklahoma. I think it would be
familiar with it. I think it was a very good analogy. In the meantime, again, we thank you for participating and for your presentation. And for those of you who are interested in more events coming up with the STC PMC, we do have, we're getting our programming for the year together. We will be having our next event is going to be in October. It's going to be taking place at Oracle in West Conshohocken, where we're going to have John Denenberg present his experiences in creating professional quality screencasts on a shoestring budget, which sounds like it's going to be really good from what I've seen. We're also still working on some other events. In November, I'm actually in talks with doing a joint event with Drexel, and we're just kind of trying to nail down the time and the place and that sort of thing, where we're hoping to talk about content quality with Daniel Mann, who is a Drexel graduate, and is currently working for the content strategy team at Facebook, and that's looking like it's going to be very good. And we do encourage you to check back at www.stcpmc.org for more details on any events that were coming up or anything about the chapter itself. We encourage you, if you're not a regular member, to sign up on our mailing list, which is on that website, so you can stay in touch with what we're doing. And at that, again, thank you, Marilyn, for your talk, and we thank everybody for your participation today.